How you doing, Adam?
Good. What about you, man?
I'm doing good.
Last day in Florida.
Yes. This is my first time in this particular area. I don't know if you want to share where we're at.
Yeah, we're Fort Lauderdale, downtown Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. How long have you lived in Fort Lauderdale?
I moved here in 2006, so it's been a while now.
And where did you come from before then?
Philly.
Philly? Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up in Philly, went to school in West Virginia for a couple years, moved back home, and then I came down here. And we kind of like, my dad was from out in like up by Scranton. So like every like Christmas and Easter we would go up and visit there out in the country. And then my mom's side is all from the city in Philly. So I always felt like it was like a weird split of like seeing both, like urban and rural, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People always say like Pennsyltucky, like in the middle, like there's Pittsburgh and Philly and then there's Pennsyltucky, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And people don't think about it, but Jersey has that too, right? Like, definitely. And it is funny because I remember like when the night that Trump won, like the next day, my mom was like horrified and she thought like the world was going to end, you know? And she's like, oh, you know, like all those evil white men Trump voters. And I was like, white men like your sons and your husband? And it was just weird because like they all got demonized so much. But growing up, we all like, everybody knew that like, oh, those are like the sweetest people on earth. Like the small town, nice, you know, like my grandparents and all the people they grew up with and around my dad, like it was kind of weird that they demonized like that.
Does your mom still think that?
Yeah, they're like aggressive Democrats. Like they have a Biden and Kamala Harris like matching mugs in the house.
So they're pretty serious.
She still has like Obama stickers on the fridge. Yeah, they're definitely serious.
Wow.
And it's funny because like she's real active in this charity, and like I had a conversation with her the other night. We were talking for like a half hour, and then she was like, "Oh yeah, so I was talking to Fetterman about blah blah blah," and I was like, "The senator?" And she's like, "Yeah," and it was like the most casual thing in the world because she had been a union rep for the teachers union, and now she does this charity work, but it's for like a nonpartisan group. But she like, it's weird how Democrats kind of think like the stuff that they're doing isn't political. Like,
well, because they're saving the world.
Yeah, and it's so much like the air that they breathe and the things that they think that like she did like a speech about being like pro-choice to like the state house in Pennsylvania, I think. But then she also is like, yeah, but the charity is nonpartisan. It's like, well, if you're doing that, obviously it's partisan, but it's weird that they don't think about it like that, you know? And I kind of think even like in pop culture stuff, like I saw people where like people on the right were mad with Taylor Swift because she was telling them to vote for Biden. And for them, it's like, it's so baked into like everything that it doesn't seem like they're doing anything like objectionable or anything like out of the ordinary. You know what I mean? And it's funny because like Biden was saying the other day, oh, like there's so many news sources, you don't know what's true and what's fake. And I actually don't think that that's people's problem with it. I just think that boomers, like when they say like, oh, back in the day when we had 3 channels and one news show that we all watched, you know? Like whether or not they think it's true or they know it's like manufactured, at least they all had like one reality to start from. You know what I mean? Like a set of assumptions that everybody had, and now that's really gone. And I see why they like yearn for that, because it's comforting, you know what I mean? And it makes the world make more sense, you know? And I don't know how you like, did you end up like changing politically over time?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, I'm just the same. So, by the way, I think you're right. There's a nostalgia aspect to having the same reality, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Hmm.
I was just talking to someone about this, how quite literally one network will talk about just these 5 stories,
Yeah.
and the other network won't even reference, like that's not even close to being a headline. Those things don't even exist
Yeah.
on the other network.
Right.
Yeah, it quite literally does feel like for some people we are in a different reality.
Totally. Yeah.
And what's important to some of us is not even close to being important.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, probably they don't even know it's happening
Yeah.
because they've been in their other reality.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they're so confused that, like, for them, they're like, why is the right fighting this culture war or whatever, you know? And for us, it's like, well, look at the books that are in the kids' school. Obviously, we're going to react to that. But again, for them, it's like all of that stuff is just built in. So it doesn't feel even like they're doing something political or like
Right.
making a statement, you know what I mean? And I think that's where we're getting such like a disconnect with people, you know? But it is also still, like we were talking about before, how much of that only exists online, and how much like I always tell people, like when I was traveling in Europe and stuff, like people ask you about America, I always say like America is like if you go to Wawa at 7 a.m. or 7-Eleven, and like people walk in, they're running to work, they hold the door open for each other, like, oh, you need the cream, they pass it to them, you know, oh, you're in front of me in line. Everybody just gets along. Like, that's the reality of life in America, you know? And the screaming and stuff people are doing each other online is like so performative. And
I completely agree.
yeah, and now that also I think people really see like how much money can be made, now it's really like stepping it up a notch, you know? Like, it's funny, I was thinking about this, that, you know, Dianne Feinstein just passed, and there was all these headlines like, you know, she had, I think it was $104 million worth of real estate and assets.
I didn't know she had that much.
And a lot of people on the right, oh my God, she's a public servant, how could she do this, da, da, da. And I think a lot of that is really just rooted in jealousy, because they're playing the game at such a high level. Like, her husband was like a Wall Street trader. They probably did unethical things, but not illegal things, right? So like, they're playing the game at such a high level that most of us don't even know exists. Like, people don't even imagine that you can have a job where you can make $5-10 million a year, every year, you know what I mean, continuously. And I think people, a lot of like the outrage about corruption is based in that. Like, every time you hear about Hunter Biden, they're always like, $80,000 a month. He was making $80,000, because for them, they find it unbelievable that anybody could make that much in a month. That's what they make in a year,
Right.
you know? But if you're Hunter Biden, like, that's nothing. Your dad is the vice president. And it's also the reason, like, everybody on the right is so surprised by it, but everybody that lives in DC knows this game and knows that, like,
Yeah.
like Mitch McConnell's wife has a lot of shady, you know what I mean? Like, all of their kids are like trading stocks and doing, you know, all of this kind of stuff. It's all built in. And I think that a lot of people are just kind of waking up to that game, and they're seeing like just how successful people can be. And they're just pissed. Like, they can't imagine that reality exists, you know? And I know I should be mad, but this is another one of those things that after living in Florida a long time, like, I was telling you before, like, for DJing, I got to play in like Mexico, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Bahamas, St. Thomas, all those islands, South America, stuff like that. In all of those countries, they don't get this worked up about politics, because America, I think we have this idea still that like people will act honestly and ethically, and we should expect that. But like in the Bahamas, everybody understands that like the prime minister's brother-in-law is gonna get like the government contracts and some, no-show jobs or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's so built in for them that it's not like a shocking thing. And we're like the last people that are like in on the joke or something. Like we're just now understanding this game, And I think that's why part of why people are so angry. Like it's not even the corruption. It's just like there's a game that they didn't know exists and people are playing it. And like you were talking about living in a different reality, like that wealth definitely makes us living in very different worlds. And interestingly, like right next to each other, because like we're right where we are in Fort Lauderdale. One of the richest guys, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy that started Blockbuster Video and the Waste Management, he lives right down the river. He's like maybe top 10 richest guys in the country. And like he's like half a mile down the river. And then another mile that way, there's a lot of people that are living on like 20, 30 grand a year in government housing, And amazingly, like we're all living right on top of each other and getting along. Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing when you think about it, And Scott Adams talks a lot about what you were talking about the different realities thing.
Right.
And he was saying that evolutionarily, we kind of evolved to where like we can have vastly different beliefs, but still get along. So like we could be in line for the groceries and like one person is a Hindu and thinks there's, however many gods, and the next person is a Christian and the next person is an atheist. And yet it doesn't matter what we actually believe because we all just go through the line and pay for our groceries, and like it has no effect on how the world actually functions. It's just like this inner life that we have.
So to put it in a particular way, it sounds like America's one of the last idealistic about politics.
It seems like it, yeah.
I mean, I think we're kind of a country built on like idealism.
Yeah, totally.
Like the American dream.
Totally, yes.
These particular concepts. I don't think there's anything wrong with striving for it.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's great, definitely.
So it's definitely good. But I understand at some point, you got to recognize the wink, wink, nod, nod.
Well, and my thing is, like conservatives a lot of time will say, like, whatever they're, like, the left is running social media and they'll cancel you, and, like, the Department of Justice is coming down on you, and da-da-da. And it's like, in the end, they say it, but I don't think they actually believe it, because they're still shocked when the system like does come down on them. Mm-hmm. Like the January 6th stuff, it's brutal what they're going through. They're put in solitary confinement for all this time, and like all this stuff that we're hearing is awful, obviously.
Right.
But you're messing with the most powerful government in the world. Like, I'm sure you've been to DC a bunch of times, right?
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. Like, can't you feel when you go into DC, like you're entering a secure state, right? It's almost like the whole city feels a little bit like an airport, like
cameras everywhere.
Yeah, like
lots of official things.
Yeah, like I remember right after 9/11, when I was in school, we would go into DC a lot for concerts, and there would even be like on the street sign, on the highway signs, it would be like threat level orange. Remember when they were doing that? Like threat level orange, threat level red. Like there were these. It was like 2004, 2005 maybe. So it was even like anxiety-inducing just to be driving into that city, because like, okay, we're entering like somewhere real. Like you can't screw around. Like we were college kids, we're partying, but it's like we all knew, like you're in DC, you have to kind of be on your best behavior,
right. You can't even speed in DC.
Yeah, and it's set up weird with the way the roads are, like the diagonal, and yeah, like I feel like, for whatever you think about, like if you believe in psychic energy or whatever, like you feel in the plate, like when you're in DC, like this is a serious place. The way like Manhattan is, like when you're in Midtown Manhattan, I feel like you kind of can tell like you're at the place where a lot of decisions are being made, and a lot of like, you know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So with the people that like, I don't understand being shocked when they throw you offline, and shocked when even when they put you in jail. Like as I mean, I think a lot of the people at January 6th, like some of them probably needed to go to jail, you know, and a lot of it was just like people got caught up in this insane story with the QAnon, and like it's maybe more of a mental health problem than anything else, you know? But again, it's like, how are you surprised? Like, they'll talk all day about like the American empire and the military-industrial complex is so powerful and da-da-da. And it's like, if you believe that, really, and you weren't, like you were saying how idealistic we are, if you believe that, like down to your core, then you wouldn't, I don't want to curse, you wouldn't mess with them. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know what you mean, yeah.
Like, and so there's a weird disconnect that it's like, people say like the government is corrupt or this or we, you know, but they really don't act like it, because they're still on this thing of like, if we elect the right person, like we're gonna be saved or it's gonna help, or, and not to be cynical, but I really think that's really just window dressing. Like the federal government has a 7 million person workforce. Like they're there every day, regardless of who comes in and or out of public office. So like it matters up to a point, but that's the government. Like that is the US government. It's the biggest organization in the world. It's the most powerful. It's the richest in the history of the world, right? And so like, they don't play, you know what I mean? And it's sad, I think, because yeah, like people, I don't know that like they're just underestimating, you know? And my thing is like, learning about like, my whole life we were like somewhat surrounded by politics, because I was saying about what my mom does, and like we always had like Rolling Stone and Newsweek magazine were always in my house. So even now, like if I think about big events, like I always think about like the cover of Rolling Stone when Kurt Cobain killed himself, or like the Newsweek when Obama got elected. Like it was like a marker in time, you know? But once I moved here and I like opened a business, because I always tell people like nothing will make you more conservative than like when you write your first check to the IRS. It's one thing when they're taking your money out of your paycheck and you like don't notice, you know? Once you start actually sending them checks, it really like sharpens up your thinking, you know? And anyway, so like I had gone down the rabbit hole of like being libertarian, getting on the right, learning about like all the stuff the CIA did in South America. My girlfriend is Persian, and so like her family had to leave Iran, go to Germany, eventually come here because of the revolution, and it's all traced back to stuff that the US and the CIA did, right? So like there's another weird thing where it's like Americans don't want to claim that. Like they'll rail against, oh my God, we have 60 military bases around the world, you know? And my thing is like, setting aside what their policy is in any given year or what they're doing, and obviously like there's been a lot of bad things that have been done, but if you're American, like they're working for us, you know? People all the time I see like, oh my God, like they're paying the military industrial complex to build these insane weapons. And I'm sort of like, yeah, good. Maybe they won't F with us then. You know what I mean? Like, this is a serious game, you know? Like, that's kind of another thing that I think just being around my girlfriend, and because she like literally grew up around a war zone, because she was on the southern coast of Iran when they were fighting with Iraq. And there was actually a really funny moment when that guy, Patrick Bet-David from Valuetainment, he's from Iran too. And he was interviewing Antonio Brown. And Antonio Brown was telling him He's from Overtown in Miami, which is a very bad neighborhood in Miami. But he was telling Patrick McDavid, like, yo, it's like a war zone. And Patrick was like, no, I'm actually from a war zone. It's not like a war, you know what I mean? Like, there was actually bombs going off in our neighborhood, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, like, I don't know. I mean, I hope people can, like, see it for what it is and, like, really, like, don't let it take over your life. Like, I think that's unfortunately what happened with a lot of the January 6th stuff, probably. Like, people got so caught up in this story. And, like, you know, people can throw their lives away or, like, waste years of your life, like, really easily, I think.
Right.
Like, you can get into, like, a certain fitness trend, and then, like, all of a sudden you're a yoga teacher, and you know what I mean? And then, like, 5 years have passed, and like that, you know what I mean? So you can get caught up in some story like that or some movement or whatever, and it can really, like, take you out, you know? And I think we don't prepare people for that, you know? There's definitely something about America that we're very susceptible to, like, cults and cult thinking. You know, like, we've invented a bunch of religions, you know, like, we have the Mormons and we have all this stuff. Have you ever heard the thing about that, like, Russia is like an old grandparent and America is like a young teenager?
No.
It must have been something I read about, like, how they used to describe, like, the Russia-US relationship, you know? But it does feel like that we're a younger country, and we sort of, like, ended up at the top, and we're like a 16-year-old kid that has a machine gun and, like, is maybe going to do something insane. You know what I mean? Like,
So I'll give you an analogy.
yeah.
America is like a wealthy millennial YouTuber.
Meaning?
Right? Like, they went viral, the YouTube page is hitting, and made $1 million riding Lamborghinis, condo in Miami.
Yeah.
And they're like, I know life,
Yeah.
and I know success, and you guys are all stupid,
Right.
you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah, like, I invested in a certain shit coin, and
Right.
it went 100x, and now I'm a financial genius.
right, exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, that's definitely good. And yeah, it's funny that, I mean, that's an interesting question too, like, with people when they become successful, like, how much we're willing to take somebody's advice about everything in life if they've happened to make a ton of money or been successful in one, like, small area.
Right.
Then we're willing to listen to what they say about everything, you know?
It sounds like you're describing Bill Gates.
Yeah, or I forget who said it, but they were talking about Nicki Minaj, because she kind of went insane a little bit during the COVID thing, you remember? She had, like, the most hilarious story, because she went on, like, Instagram Live or something, and she was like, it was something like my cousin's fiance in the Caribbean took the vax, and now it was like his testicles shrank or something.
Right.
Something insane like that. And it was so funny because, like, then the entire world had to react to that. So I remember I was watching a clip from, like, the news in the UK, and there's, like, a very, like, prim and proper woman, like, going through that whole chain of, like, Nicki Minaj's cousin's fiance's testicles have shrunk, you know what I mean? And it was just, like, a perfect moment to describe, like, everything that was happening at that moment in America. Like, it could tell you everything about, like, politics, media, pop culture, all in that one story, you know what I mean? And I forget who was saying, but I think it was Tim Dillon was saying about Nicki Minaj that, like, at a certain point, yeah, like, you have 60 million in the bank, and you're like, you know what? Like, I have some things to say, you know? And you're not going to stop me, you know? And it's one of the things that's so fun about, like, her, you know, there's, like, a cast of characters that we get to watch, you know? it's funny because like I think people look down on people that are maybe like really into reality TV, like they watch the Real Housewives of the Kardashians, and they're like they think they're better than that. I don't think like being into like politics or finance or sports or any of that is like any better or worse. You know what I mean? Like politics is clearly mostly gossip and like high school stuff,
Right.
you know, like literally this week, like I refused to look into the details of the story about the fire alarm. I just refused to even know the full thing, but just the idea that like how much Congress must be like high school.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about somebody being like a mean girl. There's clearly like cliques, like the idea that like
They literally
Lauren
call them the squad.
Huh?
They literally call them the squad.
Yeah, and then like they're going head to head with Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who like say whatever you want about them. If their job is supposed to be like the people's representative, they are doing that job. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene definitely speaks for millions of people, and Lauren Boebert. You know what I mean? Like for better or for worse, but they really are like channeling what the people that voted for them think and feel about stuff, you know? And I think, again, a lot of it is like emotional more than it's like factual. Because I've had this conversation a lot of times with liberals they keep asking me like, why do people like Trump? Why do they still like him? He didn't do anything for them. Whatever, they're voting against their interests, you know, like all of this kind of stuff. And they never understand when I tell them. It's like Trump is the one person that actually like went to their town and did a rally and paid attention to them and doesn't hate them and doesn't look down on them. And it's really honestly similar to like Lana Del Rey is doing a big tour right now of the South, you know, and like she had that thing where she was working at the Waffle House in Alabama. I don't know if you saw that, right?
Right, yeah.
Which, I don't know, I mean, she must have like wanted to feel like a normal girl for a little while, I guess, and work at Waffle House, you know? But like, she's kind of doing the same thing Trump did, where it's like, she's on a tour now. I think she's in South Florida this week or next week, actually, but she went to like Alabama. She went to North Carolina, South Florida. Like, that buys you a lot of goodwill. You know what I mean? And I think Trump really does the same thing, you know? Like, in a lot of ways, he's kind of like a comedian that's past his prime, but is still on the road,
Right.
you know? My personal thing is like, I think maybe all of this lawfare that they're doing and the cases that they're going after him, like, his sentence should be that he has to host a talk show 5 nights a week so that we all get the entertainment, because that's actually what people want.
Right.
They want his take on things, you know, and they want, like, as much as, for whatever reason, like, even for me, I can't help but like the guy, you know what I mean? Like, and like talking about analogies, like I remember I was in Europe I think it was the summer of 2017, so it was like right after Trump got elected, you know? And when you're over there looking back at here, and they were asking me about him, you know, it's like he really represents us like at our best and at our worst. Like, he's on his 3rd wife. He's like selling you another like real estate course where you're gonna get rich. You know what I mean? Like, right before he ran, I was like reading a bunch of business books, and I read one of his, which was like Think Like a Billionaire, which has so many like hilarious little quips about like how to start thinking like a rich person. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's like he is he's taller than you, he's richer than you, his wife is hotter than your wife, he says what he wants, he does what he wants. Could you describe America any better, you know? And it's so funny because a lot of times people will say like, well, I don't like how he represents us on the world stage, you know? And I would always ask them like, do you even have a passport? Like, do you even go to these countries that you're worried about how they feel about us? You know what I mean? Like, when he was at that, I don't know if it was the G7 or whatever, but they were like doing a photo shoot and he like pushed his way to the front. You remember that?
Right, yeah.
Like, he should do that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Again, it's kind of interesting that Americans, like, we haven't come to terms, I think, with how powerful we are. And we're like rightly suspicious of power because it's so dangerous, you know? But I was thinking about this because I was watching, it's called The Borgias. It was a show about like one of the popes, I think in like the 14th century in old Rome. And at the beginning, they're like laying out how much the Catholic Church dominates. Like, it's in this many countries and it's above the kings and it's, you know, ruling over everybody. And they're showing like old Rome and it's so beautiful and all this architecture. And they're positioning it as in like, look at the nefarious, evil, like dark force that this powerful thing was, you know? And I looked at it and I was like, wow, like they were ruling the world. You have to at least respect it. You know what I mean? And I feel like for Americans, it's like we have this weird thing where like we haven't come to terms with who we are in the world. And I think a lot of it is also like the stuff that if we don't do it, who will do it? Like, who will keep the shipping lanes open? Who will keep like the global trade functioning? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
what does us having military bases in all those places get us? And I sort of feel like I obviously like I empathize with the libertarian view that like we should maybe just bring everybody home and like not be involved in anybody's business and all of that. But again, it's like if you're an American and you've lived your whole life here, you've at least indirectly benefited from that.
Right.
It's a little ungrateful to then like trash it all the time.
I mean, much like you said, you know, we have all those bases, but when we do something wrong, there are repercussions for it.
Yeah,
For
absolutely,
sure.
yeah.
And so I think that, I'll speak for myself. I think that the military is being used to basically funnel money
Yeah,
from different industries.
totally, 100%, yeah.
And funnel tax money to insert country, insert special interests.
Yeah, yeah,
And in the meantime, while they're in these countries, they got to use the stuff that they make, right? So they got these bombs, they bought these bombs, they got to do something with it. You know, military's turned into one large jobs program.
totally, 100%, yes,
And
exactly.
so
Exactly what I was going to say.
we got to use it.
Well, it has been like a reliable tool to take people from lower into the middle class.
Right.
It's like a consistent tool to bring a lot of people into that. And yeah, I mean, again, like have you ever read Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
I've heard of it, I never read it.
Basically, the story is this guy was like a young economist. He got a job at the IMF. His job was to go to a third world country like Panama, Costa Rica, or somewhere that we wanted a certain natural resource they had or something like that. The IMF would lay out a plan that says like, if we loan you this many billions of dollars, then you'll have an electrical grid or a port or whatever infrastructure. We'll build it for you and you can owe us the money. But it's just the American government like paying itself basically, because the money never even like reaches them. You
Right.
know what I mean? And so yeah, like it's been going on since the 50s. It's happening in Ukraine now. And again, I don't know if I'm like just cynical about it, but I just feel like that's the world that we live in, and I don't really see it changing. Like too many vested interests in it, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the absence of us not doing that would mean. Because like, would it mean that China is gonna handle all of that stuff if they become the superpower? you know, because a lot of those stories about like the Banana Republic, like, do you know where the term Banana Republic comes from? You know, like the story behind it?
I did at one point. I forgot.
Just there was actually another like insane American story that this guy, they called him Sam the Banana Man. There's a book called The Fish That Ate the Whale. He was a Russian Jewish immigrant that came here, and he started selling bananas. We didn't have refrigeration, and so people only bought them if they were green. The yellow ones were considered trash.
Okay.
He would take the yellow ones and sell them faster. He built this business up so huge that he eventually took over like what now is Dole. And what he was doing was like those countries, Costa Rica, Panama, like in Central America.
Right.
He basically bought huge tracts of land, all these hillsides that were perfect for planting bananas, and shipped all of the fruit here and made the people work for nothing. And there was a couple of times that there would be like revolutions in those countries, and the government would try to seize the land. And he, a couple of times, actually like launched ships out of New Orleans of like mercenaries, I guess, to go and fight them and fight those governments. Eventually he got powerful enough that he had like the US government do his bidding for him, basically. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Banana Republic thing is because all those countries were just like a banana economy.
Right.
And all of the instability that, I mean, a lot of it we caused, but you then have to think about it that at that moment in history, it was either going to be us or the Soviets. And so it's like, yeah, what we did probably was awful, but maybe what they would have done would have been a lot worse, you know? Like I have a lot of friends here that are Brazilian and Colombian and stuff like that, and like for them the stuff like hyperinflation and like the idea that like the money really could just be worthless out of nowhere, or like, right. You know, there's certain things in just like the structure of government that we have that keeps, like, we have like a very clear dividing line between the military and the police. The military doesn't do anything domestically. For them, it's all just one big police force, like a right. national police force. So you go to Colombia and there's like dudes walking around with machine guns in the middle of the city, you know what I mean? Like keeping the peace. Like, again, I guess it's the same thing of like, they're living so much closer to the edge than we are. And like, maybe not in their lifetime, but in their parents' lifetime, like the bottom fell out and they all had to start over, you know what I mean? So I just think, yeah, like, I don't know. We're spoiled by like the stability of America, you know?
No, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, I have a friend, I haven't talked to him in a while, but from Iran.
From Iran?
I met him in person when I went to Hungary. And I remember talking to him later on, because he had just moved to Hungary to get his PhD.
Yeah.
He had a family, and I think he was working to get his family to come over as well. But at the time, it was just him. And I think it was like some weeks later, he was like, I think the U.S. had put more sanctions on Iran, mm-hmm. and it was causing their dollar to plummet.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what I should do. Mm-hmm. Like, do I just go back home? Because my dollar is becoming worthless here. Mm-hmm. You know, and he was someone who, I guess you could say, I don't want to say privileged, but it sounded like he was doing okay. In Iran, and was able to leverage that to come to a different country. Yeah. To get his PhD.
Yeah, I mean, Iran, it's insane because like my girlfriend, when you see pictures of like her dad or whatever, you know, mm-hmm. like they're dressed like it's Mad Men in the 50s. They were like completely westernized, right. You know? And so, yeah, like there's a lot of wealth there. Like that's the oldest civilization in the world, right? Mm. Like I think that's basically where like the cradle of civilization, right? They say the first empires came.
I'm not a history buff. So.
Yeah. They're like Babylon, right? First, I don't know. But anyway,
I can't remember.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting too where it comes, because another thing people always complain about is that we have this two-party system, you know? Everybody thinks we should have more political parties, but from my like limited watching what goes on with like the elections where you vote for the party and then they put in a prime minister, so you don't actually vote for the person, you just vote for the party. And then a lot of times they have to put together like weird coalition governments and all of that. I think it was when I read Charles Krauthammer's book, he was saying that America's political system was basically like, if you took a whole football field, we were playing between like the 60-yard line. So like maybe in Europe there would be like the Green Party and the Communists, and then like the Liberal Democrats and more conservative, all the way to like fascist. And they're like all like a real represented, you know what I mean? But for us, so they would be like the entire football field. But for us, we only really stay between like the two 60-yard lines or whatever, you know? And so, yeah, like, it's actually, I think, a privilege that we've lost, which is like America used to be a place where you didn't have to pay attention to politics. And like you had every right to F off and not care about it. And it was like handled for you, you know what I mean? And it's been interesting that like Obama was such a good TV president, you know? He's so good on like a late night show, Comedians in Cars with Seinfeld, like he's amazing at that kind of stuff. Trump even more, obviously, you know? And so it's interesting how it's merged into, like we were talking about before, this like infotainment thing, you know? But yeah, I mean, ideally, America would be a place where you didn't have to care like who won, you know?
Right.
And I think honestly, like people get way too caught up in thinking like, okay, Biden's president or Trump is president, and so that means like my personal success like depends on that. Which, from what I can tell, no. Like the people that make money, like serious money, make it whoever's in power, you know? They find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it seems like people like almost hype themselves, like they work themselves up into thinking, oh, I'm not gonna be able to get ahead because inflation is so bad and gas costs so much and da-da-da. And it's like, it makes life harder, definitely, you know? But it doesn't really affect your life in the way that you think. And again, like the cast of characters of like the people in Congress, like again, it's just like reality TV. It's the same thing, you know what I mean? It's the same kind of drama, and we love drama, you know? Like I've never been in a working environment that didn't have like backstabbing and gossip. And I remember thinking, like, one of my ex-girlfriends, she was an analyst at a hedge fund, and like even she would come home and be like, God, everybody I work with are idiots, you know? And sometimes like you get the leaks out of DC about like the staffers did something embarrassing or whatever, you know what I mean? And you think like, is there any place where like people don't think everybody that they work with is idiots? Like, is there any competency, you know what I mean? Like there must be, but people seem to just generate that kind of drama. Like it seems like we need it somehow.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think humans need strife. It reminds me of The Matrix. You know, the architect, when he said, this isn't the first version of The Matrix. Earlier versions were perfect societies, and the humans rejected it. And I believe that, you know? I think
it would create a problem where there wasn't one.
Right.
Yeah.
Or that they constructed a society that was void of problems, and they couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I see that there are a lot of people. See, for me, I'm kind of like, I like peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I like peace. I like less problems. But I do like a little bit of problem. right? It kind of reminds me
Like something to sink your teeth into.
yeah, or just something that's not clean.
No,
Like, I'll give
say
you
it again, sorry.
Not clean. Like
Clean? Okay.
yeah, yeah. I'll give you an example. You've been to Berlin, right?
Where?
Berlin.
Yeah, for a couple days.
Have you ever been to Vienna?
Vienna? No.
Yeah. Okay. So Berlin, people haven't been there. Berlin is graffiti, crazy nightlife,
Yeah.
edgy, right? You'll see families and you'll see people wearing all black with
Techno
piercings.
parties all night.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not clean. It's edgy.
Yeah.
Vienna, there's like nothing. There's nowhere. It's just clean.
There's no like bad part of town.
It
Everything's
didn't- at least it
beautiful,
didn't feel
works.
that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it just there's no graffiti. There's no edginess. Everything is nice.
Yeah.
It's too nice. Like
Yeah.
it's just, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
It's funny because I think right now I see a lot of, especially like, you know, there's like the trad movement, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and I understand this fantasy, you know, because my girlfriend will go on Zillow, which is porn for women, right? Real estate, porn for women, basically. And she'll look at houses like some lake house in the middle of nowhere that's like a quarter of the price that I paid for my place here.
Right.
And it's like, look at the life we could live, you know? But I think like they're underestimating what, like, yeah, like pretty much exactly what you're saying. Like, do they really want to live in a place of that much quiet, like where nothing is going on and there's, you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people, like the fantasy is probably better than the reality.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it too is that, like, I went to school in West Virginia for a while. I was telling you that my dad is from like upstate Pennsylvania, which is a real poor place. And like the same, like socioeconomic, whatever problems that are in the inner city are also in the trailer parks.
Right.
Like the same dysfunction, drug use, family issues, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you're not really gonna like free yourself from it, you know? But like it's interesting because we were talking on Twitter Spaces last night, and somebody was saying how like he's probably worth, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 million, you know? And he was talking about like he had been in Turkey for a while, and he was just kind of saying, which is a thought I think a lot of us have when we travel, which is like, man, the life I could live here where like my dollar gets me 4 times, 5 times as nice a place. You know, I could live in some beautiful condo. The women are beautiful, and whatever like political and cultural stuff that we're all caught up in here because we're Americans, and so we have like a sense of ownership. I think there's a dream of like if I lived on the beach in Belize, I wouldn't care who was president of Belize, and I wouldn't even be like. I think that's the fantasy.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think it's interesting that so many American, especially men, are on this like passport bros tip, and you can't blame them for wanting a better life. The thing that's confusing for me is like I'm dreaming of moving to the beach somewhere in South America, but everybody in South America is trying to come here. They're like literally risking their lives to try to come here, you know?
Right.
So I don't know quite how to square that, you know?
Oh, so, okay.
Did you ever read 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss's book?
No.
He writes a lot about like geo arbitrage and this kind of stuff. And he did a lot of like international traveling. And this is like, I think the book came out maybe like 2006 or 7. So it was a lot of like early internet stuff about how to get arbitrage. And I just remember there's a line in the book where he was like living in Argentina, and he was said like all of his workers were in India and his business was in America. And he was like, he said like when you're earning dollars, spending pesos, and paying people in rupees, life gets pretty interesting. And like is true. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that like, it is a big world out there. And like you, especially as Americans, like you really can make like whatever you want out of it. You know what I mean? And
No, I agree with that. I almost moved out of the country to Germany. I was going to
was
take
this after you were married or before?
before.
Okay.
So I was thinking about taking this project, and the project fell through, and I never went. But looking back at it now, I'm glad I didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a period in my life where I felt a little, I don't want to say stuck, but I needed a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I wanted a challenge. I probably want a challenge, but like maybe not moving to another
Well, how
country.
old were you?
This wasn't that long ago. It was like COVID has messed my
Yeah,
memory
sense of
up.
time, yeah.
Yeah,
It was a
sense of
time
time.
warp. Yeah.
I think it was probably like 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm glad I didn't go because it kind of, as I was going through like a political transformation and really like being introspective, I realized I was taking things for granted about being here.
Mm-hmm.
And even for like a Western European nation like Germany, life is different.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think like it's like America. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not.
No.
I mean, when you're visiting, yes, most of the people speak English,
Mm-hmm.
so you feel comfortable. The signs are in a different language, but you know it's not too bad. But sometimes they have both.
Yeah.
So it's not like going to.
Well, every European city knows that tourism is their best business. So
Right.
those cities are almost like, the whole city is almost a museum. That's how it feels a little bit to me.
in some
Sometimes
ways,
when you're
yes.
there, yeah.
Especially in certain parts, yes.
Yeah. Like that sounds like the Vienna you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So, but when you remove all that, you start understanding like one, they don't really have a First Amendment.
Yeah.
Like you can go there and speak, but they do have, if I remember correctly, they do have like hate speech laws,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's not like my intention is to go there and say blasphemous things,
Right.
but it just makes me think about like what I do here. Like I could talk shit about Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and no one's knocking at my door to arrest me
Yeah.
saying I'm being offensive.
And I remember you tweeting once, you were saying how you love that you write for the Post because you can talk smack about politicians and they might actually read it.
Right.
Which cracked me up. And that's one of the things that really impresses me. Like we were talking before, but like I love the Post. I love like the Daily Mail, this kind of stuff. I mean, I guess it gets back to the drama thing, but it's like, I just love like they should give out awards for those headlines. I know people call them clickbait, but like some of them are just a work of art, you know?
The New York Post, and I'm not just saying this because I write for them, the New York Post has the best headlines. There was times I've messaged my editor, I was like, I'm sorry, but I literally laughed out loud reading that headline.
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, it was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, and I'm not even sure if she knows who does like the main like headlines.
Well, I remember seeing that documentary about Anthony Weiner,
Okay.
and I remember there's a scene where he sits down with somebody from the Post, and she says, so my first question is, what was your favorite cover? Because every time he did something more insane, the Post could come up with a better and better headline,
Right.
you know? And so yeah, they know for sure. Like, I mean, Rupert Murdoch owns the Post, right?
Right.
Okay. It's interesting also that, like, that's really like an English model of like gossip and tabloid
Yeah,
news
you're
and
right.
stuff that he brought here. That I don't know. I guess it wasn't really here before, but now it's been turned into like just an institution and just like a money printing machine. Like we were talking before about this week, like the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, like the rollout of their relationship, and just like how like well oiled it ran, you know, and how many people had to work on that and to make it look like it was all natural, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just like these two giant corporate things like Taylor Swift's labels and her agents and that whole team, and then the NFL, which is still the biggest show on TV. It's still like the highest rated thing in the country, you know, coming together to like make money, you know.
Right.
I mean, to get clicks, to get views, you know. Like I saw recently there was a headline saying that, I don't know which paper, but there was like a job offer for like $100,000 to just be on the beat of just to cover like Taylor Swift, or maybe the other one was Kim Kardashian, maybe.
Okay.
But your entire job was just to write articles about them.
That sounds boring.
Does sound boring, yeah. But it's,
Because I would imagine you start exaggerating.
yeah. I mean, I'm curious. So, like, when you with the post, like, they never tell you what to write, right?
No.
Do they ask you, like, do they have story ideas ever?
So, and this doesn't happen with everybody. So I've built a good relationship with them. My first article I wrote with them, I pitched to them. And then I think my second article was like a few weeks later, I pitched to them. And they got good responses, and they liked what I wrote. So then it started with them contacting me saying, hey, we want to run a story about this. We want to have an opinion to attach to it. What's your take on this? So it would be something like that. So then I would give my take. They say,
Yeah.
okay, we like it. Write something for us, due date, or
Yeah.
it's due this time. And then I would write.
It's funny because my Twitter bio recent, like a month or two ago, was like just trying to make it in the hot take economy, trying to get by in the hot take economy. So it's kind of funny that you've actually done it, and you're like literally doing that, you know? And yeah, I mean, I've always wondered too, because like people have such a nefarious view of like Fox and News Corp and Rupert Murdoch, and I really have no opinion one way or another. Like, it seems like there's some shady money behind him, probably like international money and whatever. But
I mean,
I know that when the Theranos story happened, his journalist at the Wall Street Journal was the one that like uncovered the Theranos story and called it BS on it and brought her down, you know? And Rupert Murdoch was in for like, I forget what it was, like $100 million or $50 million, you know? And his reporter was the one that like tanked their company and his investment. He lost all of that money, and he didn't interfere. So I don't know what to make of it exactly.
I mean,
It doesn't mean for me that he's like good or bad, but I don't
I'm
know.
also thinking like, how much money does Rupert Murdoch have?
Yeah, billions.
So I mean, like, I'm not trying to crap on 50 million, but part of me is wondering, is like, better luck next time.
Yeah, I mean, the way people must think about money at that level is probably so different. Like, it's
Right.
interesting, like last night I was up until like 3 or 4 in the morning because I was on the Twitter space with Martin Shkreli,
Okay.
and he's covering the SBF trial. He has like a very specific, unique insight into that because he got taken down by the same authorities in New York. He went to the same jail. It was for a financial thing. Like, so he knows what Bankman is going through. And like, the way he was so cavalier about money to the average person, like, gobsmacks us, you know? How could you be so careless with everyone's money, you know? But when you hear crypto people say, like, fiat is fake, the currency is all, you know, which always cracks me up because money is like the one thing that we all agree on.
Right.
To say it's fake is kind of insane to me because we all structure our lives and what we do, like most of our time is to get money, you know what I mean? And we literally put a price tag on our time, you know? So it seems to me like it's the one thing we do all agree on.
Right.
And also, like, every time their coin is pumping or whatever, like, they always will tell you how many dollars it's worth. You know what I mean? So they're still pricing it in terms of dollars. But anyway, they say it's fake. And so, like, you're talking about Rupert Murdoch and 50 million, and for us it seems insane, but Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I can even like conceive of what having that level of wealth and resources, like how that makes you view the world, you know, like because for Bankman, I think, you know, I forget who I was reading, but they were talking about how since the people that are making like everything in tech are basically like you could say like a little bit on the spectrum, right? Or at least like oriented in that way. Like they're kind of like they're engineer thinkers. They're very literal thinkers, and
Right.
I actually think way too much lately. People are like they'll call anybody that's smarter than them autistic, which is like I kind of disagree with. It's like no, they're just way smarter than you and me probably, and like we can't even conceive the way that they view the world. And so with him like playing with people's money like that, like he had some weird like arbitrage where he could like buy Bitcoin in Japan before the price changed here. You know what I mean? Like some insane thing because he was like an MIT math genius. And they were saying that like when he got out of school, he started to work, I forget what the name of the hedge fund is, but they basically like started him at 300 grand during his internship. Then his salary was 600, and then they told him within a year you'll be making like 5 to 10 million a year. And that wasn't good enough for him, so he started FTX. And again, like I don't know about you, like I grew up so middle class that like I didn't know that those games existed. Like we were talking about this earlier, but like the level again that those people are playing at, like Nancy Pelosi and Feinstein and all the people in finance and politics, like I know that people on the left get very upset about like the CEO pay, you know, which I don't really have an opinion on. Like if you're making a very profitable company, I don't know, who am I to say how much you should earn? That's how I feel.
Right.
But I saw like the CEO of Peloton is making 146 million a year. That's unbelievable for a guy that has like an exercise bike company. You know what I mean?
I mean, but they're all part of a board,
Yeah,
and they must be okay with it.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, the market dictates it. Yeah.
I've never been one to say, like, this person has too much money.
Yeah. No, I want to
I-
know how they did it and how they can tell the rest of us to do it.
I think there are people who, we could sit down right now with a billionaire, and he tell us step by step what needs to be done.
What he was?
And he could tell us step by step what needs to be done, right?
What needs to be done, like for us to make money? Or?
Yeah, become a billionaire. He's like, follow my blueprint and you will be a billionaire. However, it will take you 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, most people would be like, no, I don't really want to
Yeah.
go through all
Yeah.
that. Or, now, this part is risky, and if you fail, then we'll do something else, but you're going to lose a lot of money. Or you have to invest at a time where you have to work 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
You know, so I think a lot of people look at the outcome, but they don't look at the journey to get there.
Totally. Yeah.
And the biggest thing, they don't look at the risk.
Yeah.
The level of risk, like they look at someone who creates a business, becomes a multimillionaire, and they say, look at that, they made this business and they're a multimillionaire. I was like, but look at how many people they employ
Yeah.
and the risk if they fuck it up.
Yeah.
They lose everything.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Jeff Bezos, yes, he's a billionaire, but not in liquid assets. He doesn't have like
Yeah. It's stock. Yeah.
in stock.
Yeah.
Right? So if, I don't know, he starts murdering people at Amazon and ruins the image of Amazon, money starts to plummet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe another competitor sees like, listen, Amazon is starting to go down. We need to start investing in this because everything's in shambles.
Yeah.
Right? So his company is at risk if he does something wrong.
Yeah.
Now, it's at a certain size where there are a lot of hands
Yeah.
to kind of keep it going.
Well,
But even at a small, medium-sized business,
Yeah.
where the CEO is more visible, the owner is more visible, all that is risk.
yeah. And I think people don't, like, from what I've seen from talking to people, people have no idea what like corporate governance is, what the difference between having a private or publicly traded company is. Like you're saying about being a CEO, like that means your contract has like a morality clause. You can't get caught in a hotel room doing something shady, you know what I mean, at 2 a.m. in Miami Beach. You know, like you have to be on guard about all of that stuff. And yeah, I don't want to, I mean, I just feel like it's dangerous to like I've seen people on Twitter say like, once you get to 999 million, like they said like we shouldn't have billionaires. Once you get to that level of wealth, you say like, hey, good job, like you won, but anything over that we're going to take, you know? Which to me seems, I mean, it's just kind of dumb, but I understand their point, you know what I mean? Like it's such an obscene level of wealth that it's, like you said, it's almost imaginary, you know?
But what if they said, hey, once you reach 80,000 a year, you have enough.
Yeah, that's where it would go. It would go there right away, yeah.
And it's like, well, who are you to tell me what's enough?
100%, right.
Like that was one of the things about Germany that I started learning, is that they cap incentives in how they tax.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you start making more money, they just come down on you hard. We're not talking about like millions. Right? We're talking about like, let's say close to 100,000 or maybe even less. But when you start reaching that threshold and going past it, the amount that they'll tax you makes working harder worthless. Because it's like, well, why am I working harder if they're going to come down on me? That, and I don't make that much more because of the tax difference. So they basically incentivize you to do less. And it makes it hard for the outliers in society who are entrepreneurs, who are creative, to build something, right, and get support. Like at least here, there's some sort of support. Like it's not incredibly difficult to start a business here. Right, and you can get support from the government. You get tax credits. You get all these things that support businesses, so they can flourish because they understand that if you flourish, that means that you're likely going to hire people, and the government doesn't have to pay for these people to live on welfare or anything like that. So we're not going to hinder you from doing that. And on top of that, the more money you make, the more taxes you're paid. And your employees are going to pay taxes. It goes back into the system. So it's a win-win for everybody. But to kind of cap incentives, it's like the very few are willing to go past that.
Well, and it's interesting because my thing of like I remember Roger Scruton, they asked him like, what does it mean to be conservative? And he said, it's the impulse to conserve things. And I think like, to the extent that I am conservative, it's like, I just understand and appreciate like how hard it is to build something. And it's funny because when we were kids, like, I feel like everything we learned about history and geography was all based on like natural resources. You know, like that's the reason why everything happened, which I guess maybe in a more simple economy, that's what it was. But I always think about like the border is just an imaginary thing anyway. So if you're like in Texas or Arizona or California or Mexico, like it's the same land, the resources aren't any different. So what's the difference maker? It must be like our legal system, contract law, like stuff like that, you know? And to the extent that I'm a conservative, it's just like, I just feel like, let's not mess with what works and has been working, you know? It's gotten us this far. And it's funny too, because like I remember, I feel like we make stuff so much harder than it has to be. Like I remember one day I was watching like NBA stuff, and I watched Michael Jordan and then Shaq's Hall of Fame speeches when they got inducted to the Hall of Fame, which Michael Jordan's was hilarious because he went after like everybody who ever said a bad thing about him. But the funny thing about both of them was both of their dads were in the military. I think for Shaq it was his stepdad, but they both said like, thank God for my dad who taught me like how to order my life. And for them to, they knew like, okay, he's going to be an athlete. They showed kind of like, avoid this, you know, go. But my thing is like, that's available to everybody, you know? And it's interesting too, when you were saying before that like, for you, you want peace. I feel like we don't really have good working definitions of the differences between like happiness, contentment, peace, pleasure. We classify all of those things like as just like happiness in like a vague kind of way. But like I didn't grow up particularly religious at all. I think sooner or later I'm gonna go get baptized, but I'm still like in that process, you know? But from what I've seen, like, I don't know if you saw this week, there was a clip of Joe Rogan going around where he was saying like, there's no book for life that just teaches you how the world works and how to get through it.
No, I missed that.
And everyone was like, oh, you're talking about the Bible, right? Joe Rogan invented the Bible. And sort of, I get that, but he was also talking about like how to make money and, you know what I mean? But from what I've seen, it seems like the Christian, like American middle, whatever class way of life, like is available to all of us. And the way the critics of religion talk about like God is punishing you if you break the rules, they view it as like a father figure that's coming down on you, you know? Like they have a very like second grade Sunday school interpretation of all this stuff, I think. Like even like Sam Harris and those guys haven't updated it from that, you know what I mean? From what I can tell, it seems like the biblical laws and stuff are more descriptive. So it's not that God will punish you if you get off the path or whatever. It's that that's the way the world works, you know? And for me, like, I've known a lot of people that like got caught up in drugs really bad. Like we're basically the same age. You said you're 39.
Yeah.
I'm 38. So I'm sure for you, like, I don't know, but I've lost like a lot of friends to the opiate crisis. Like we were prime time in high school and college when everybody was doing oxys and they were everywhere, you know? And a lot of my friends that like grew up in normal middle class households would have never been driving into the city to cop heroin, but they got addicted to OCs and then all of a sudden they're there, you know, and now they're doing fentanyl. And it really like took a bite out of our generation, you know? Yeah. Like in a way that I don't think we've come to terms with yet. Like I was telling my dad the other night, like he went to like his high school reunion recently. And for me, like out of my like whatever, say like top 5 best friends from high school, 2 of them are left. The other 3 have all OD'd.
Wow.
And anyway, so I guess my point is like, I don't know what the afterlife is, you know, but I know that like you can create hell for yourself here, you know, like hell is like you're on 95, like asking for money in the 105-degree heat on the hot pavement and you haven't taken a shower for 3 days to get enough money for your next fix. Like you're in hell, you know? And again, it's like, it seems like there's this guidebook or whatever, and again, like we haven't defined what happiness is or what the good life is really, you know? But it does seem to me that like, if you followed that path, you could reasonably hope for at least a peaceful life.
Yeah.
You know? And it's really funny that even in like, do you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah.
So there's an episode where or like a season where Larry thinks he was like adopted by a Gentile family instead of being Jewish. So half my family is Jewish, the other half is Christian, right? And like the worldview of like Seinfeld and Curb and like that kind of like ironic cynicism of the Northeast and just like our in general, like our culture, you know. That's like what we grew up in, I think. That's what I grew up in. And it's just funny because there's an episode of that show where he thinks his parents weren't Jewish and that they were actually Christian. And he goes to live with a family, and they're exactly like my dad's parents were, just like good, white, old, Christian, forgiving, loving, peaceful people. And he becomes that way. He like forgives his friends and like has a transformation. And then at the last second, he finds out, oh no, that wasn't true. His parents were his parents. And then he goes right back to like the cynical, ironic way.
Right.
So it's just funny because it's like even in our own, like our own whatever comedy, like they recognize that the people that are Christian have found some level of peace that Jewish people don't have, or whatever, non-Christian people don't have, you know? So I don't know what to make of all of it, but yeah, like with the Shaq and MJ thing, it's like because of who their dads were, even if they weren't sports stars, they would have been fine, right? Like they would have gotten some job and like managed their lives well enough to be in the middle class and live like a normal life. So to the extent that like politics, I think, and all this stuff is frustrating, it's just that like I do feel like that path is there, and for whatever reason we just ignore it and push it away and discount it, and it's sad.
I agree.
I mean, I'm definitely curious because I know you have kids and I don't, and so I'm definitely curious like how much that, because I've always heard like you're not really a man until you have a son or a daughter, and like you're also not really a man until your dad passes, you know, because you're not really on your own.
I don't know about all that,
But just to the point that,
but I understand the emphasis behind it. I think my son helped me become a man
yeah,
quicker,
yeah,
because I think manhood is also including being selfless,
selfless,
yeah, and sacrificing for someone else, and being an example for someone else.
yeah,
And it's just even more intimate because you help to create them, right? So they're your blood, and my son is the only man that I truly root for to be incredibly better than me, right? So I think I understand where that comes from. I just I wouldn't put it that way, but
yeah,
I understand where it comes from.
Yeah. I mean, the only point I was making is that you've had like a worldview shift that I have, because my brother has a couple kids now, and so I see like how his life has changed and his perspective has changed, and because when you're still like single and on your own, you know, you still have the option to like let your life fall apart for better or for worse, you know.
Yeah.
And when you have kids, you just don't have that like room, you don't have that room to fail. And I think it's like that thing about you burn your ships behind you. Whichever one of the explorers, it was one of the Spanish explorers when he like hit America. He was going to fight the Indians, I think the Aztecs. And he like burned his ships because he was telling his men like, we do this or we die, we're not going home, kind of a thing. So
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it seems like I've heard people say that about having kids. It's like you almost like you get in a boat and it's like you're off into this life that's your old life is completely behind, something like that.
Yeah, I can see that. But real quick, I wanted to ask you, I try to ask as like a final question, are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's things that scare me, obviously, but you know, I do wonder, like, it's like everybody's talking about how bad the cost of living is. Like, a lot of people our age haven't been able to buy a property or make serious investments like that. And I was out to eat last week. I was home in Philly with my dad and his friends, and they're all like in their 70s now, and they all did like middle class, maybe upper middle class type jobs, accountant, CFO. One of them owned like a body shop, But they're all retiring, I would imagine, with probably like low 7 figures or whatever. And I was asking them about it, and they were like, yeah, like the late 70s and early 80s were just as bad as it is now. And they were basically at the same age, like just starting out with their families. Like my dad's friend said his first mortgage rate was 13%, And they basically did kind of what we were talking about, which is like, they just like showed up and did the work and like slowly built up the money, not quickly, but slowly built the wealth. And I think in the end, probably our generation is going to do the same thing. Like, we're going to have money. People that had normal middle class jobs are going to have like a couple properties probably. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very different, obviously, but I think generally like America will succeed. The currency isn't going to crash. All of that doom and gloom, I'm so done with it. Like, I remember my buddy saying he was like waiting for the epic crash, like all of Obama's presidency. And because of that, he lost out on however much gains he would have made by investing in, you know what I mean? And like, yeah, I just think like America's going to be fine. We're going to be fine. It's going to be different. Like, it's definitely not going to be the same country we were born into. It's already not. But I think if you go to Miami, Miami's like barely an American city. It's basically a South American kind of city,
Yeah.
And it functions, It's a million different groups. Like even in Fort Lauderdale, if you go to the DMV, it's like you're at the UN, you know what I mean? But everybody gets along and like it functions. And I think it will continue to.
Good.
And yeah.
Well,
I've been trying to convince myself.
You're trying to convince yourself?
I don't know if I sounded convincing, but yeah, I am definitely optimistic.
Okay. I'm always optimistic.
Yeah.
I see a lot of positive things happening around me.
Do you think your son is going to have a better life than you had?
Yeah. He's already there.
He's already there, yeah. He had a better childhood already?
Yeah. He has better guidance. Mm-hmm. I was very much so lost.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anybody to reach out to feel like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea?
Yeah.
Am I wasting my time? Even down to women. It's like, what do you think of this woman? Like, I didn't have a male perspective to help guide me. So he's already ahead of me.
Yeah.
Because he has me as like to help, as like, keep him on course.
Yeah.
When he asks for it.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic, just in general.
Yeah.
I think throughout human history, there's always going to be problems.
Yeah.
Different problems, they come and they go, and the stuff that we're dealing with today, the culture stuff, it'll fade away because some of it is a trend.
Yeah. And it's so hyperbolic, like the people that are online every day, like Biden is the worst president we've ever had. It's like, give me a break. Like, he's just another 80-year-old white dude from the Northeast, like in a long line of dudes like that are a little bit corrupt, but whatever. And like, the country is not doing that bad. You know what I mean? There's still tons of opportunity. Like, I really love like Tom Wolfe. Have you ever read any of Tom Wolfe's books? Mm-hmm. Like, he writes a lot about how New York would always have like new money every like 10 or 15 years because some new industry would take off, and so it would like mint a new set of rich families that would then integrate into, the old money was always mad at the new money and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think like, it's funny because even like with investing, people are always like, oh, if I had done this back then, I would have, but it's like, those opportunities are happening right now. And 5 years from now, we're going to say, God, why didn't I, whatever,
Right.
So yeah, it seems like it's all definitely there. And I mean, one maybe like unpopular opinion that I do have is that maybe like the TikTok and Reels, Instagram Reels culture that everybody is talking down on, like obviously has its problems, but what I've been noticing is that good information travels really fast. And so like, again, like I feel the same kind of way that like when I was like 20, 18 years old, I was just winging it. I didn't have like a guide at all to like feel my way around for what was the right thing to do. And now like you can get advice about everything, like your fitness, how to look good in pictures, how to dress, how to meet people, like how to make money. All of that information is available to you.
Right.
And I was talking with a buddy of mine that's a programmer yesterday about AI, and it's like the AI, because it's just been trained on like all of the internet of everything that's been written, like it knows the right way to do things you know what I mean? Like it knows, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but anyway, I just think like good information travels faster than ever. I think Gen Z is going to be the best looking generation of all time because they're going to be used to being on camera. Like when we were 18 years old, was there like people telling you how to chisel your jawline and like do your hair the right way? You know what I mean? Like none of that stuff was available to us.
That's true.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think maybe in the end, like it has its problems, but it's a good thing.
Okay. Well, once again, I do appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. This was fun. I'm sorry if I talk too much.
No.
Sometimes I
think it was good to hear your perspective and for other people to hear your perspective because you don't talk politics too much publicly.
Yeah.
As a musician, so I think it was probably freeing to put it out there.
Yeah.
So, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, man, definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And it was definitely interesting to get to talk to somebody that you agree with, like, because we know each other from Twitter, basically.
Right.
And I always felt like you were the kind of guy that I could get along with, but now I know for sure. And that's kind of interesting, too, that, like, you do get enough of a feel for somebody based off that you can feel like, oh, I would probably vibe with this person. And it's funny that like how much of politics and stuff is still based on that old thing of like, who would you rather have a beer with, you know? And again, like back to the cast of characters that are making up our political life, like Lauren Boebert, all those people, like she seems like she'd be fun to have a beer with, you know? I'm not a drinker, but you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure about her, but thank you once again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming. It was a lot of fun
being part of this.
Yeah.